Hey everyone, Reed here with Big Strong Book, and today I'm going to be reviewing Henry James, The Untried Years, 1843 to 1870, by Leon Edel. So this book is the first of 5 volumes in Leon Edel's biography of Henry James. Again, this one only covering about the first 27 years of his life. And then the remaining 4 covering the rest of his career. Henry James is an author that I've, over the past few months, have started to grow more familiar with. I've read works like The Aspern Papers and A Portrait of a Lady, and I've wanted to kind of dive in more. I haven't even read The Turn of the Screw yet. Sooner or later I'll get around to reading some of his earlier novels like The Americans and The Bostonians. But I guess the way that Henry James approaches character, kind of really getting into the psychology of just about any character that comes across the page in his books, in his novels, in his novellas, and his short stories is very fascinating to me. But also knowing where he got his influence from now. Of course, the review that I posted on the channel before this was a review of Père Goriot by Honoré de Balzac. Balzac was one of the many influences on Henry James. One of the interesting things for those who maybe are a little more unfamiliar with James is that he was an American author who spent most of his life living in Europe, mainly in and around London. He came from a family of means, quite extensive means. His father inherited a great deal of wealth as a young man when Henry James's grandfather died. And Henry James's father, who was also named Henry James. Henry James Sr. became I believe it's Swedenborgian minister and a proponent for this sect of Christianity, or maybe not a sect, but an interpretation of Christianity that really emphasized kind of a free spirit way of doing things. At least that's how I interpreted it. I have not read those texts. I'm not super familiar with the movement, so I can't exactly speak to that part of Henry James Sr. But through his writings, his father was already hooked in with people like Ralph Waldo Emerson, and then through his father's writing and his influence as one of the leading religious thinkers, philosophers of his day, was that authors like Thackeray, when Thackeray came over to the United States for a tour, he stopped by the James house. Henry James, growing up, was in and around all of these influences, both on the page and in his home, which I found very fascinating. He met Dickens as a young man when Dickens came over in the late 1860s for his second tour of America, where he was also doing his legendary readings in New York and in Boston. I believe they were living in Boston at the time, and he briefly met Charles Dickens and was struck by, and as Edel states in here, Henry James was struck by the gaze, the look of Charles Dickens, because Dickens didn't say anything to him, but he just gave him like a piercing look, and that always stayed with him for the rest of his life. But anyway, Henry James, his parents wanted their children to kind of experience the cultural institutions of Europe. So one of his earliest memories is of being in Paris, and there's a great passage partway through this book where he goes, I think, to the Louvre for the first time, and he sees these artworks, and it's like the horizons in his creative mind just open up completely, and he's so stunned by what he sees. He can't imagine that such creative abilities were possible, that the things that he was seeing in the paintings. And Henry James, as he ages, kind of attaches a little bit of this cultural superiority between Europe and America, and that is a theme, the trying to reconcile a newer world, a newer civilization with an older civilization. That's anybody who reads just about any of his novellas, short stories, or novels knows that is one of the biggest preoccupations, because it was such an intense struggle, like internal struggle throughout his whole life, knowing that he was an American, but he much preferred being in Europe and surrounding himself with the French and the Swiss and the English, as opposed to Americans in New York or Americans in New England or wherever. That is what he preferred. And it dives into so this book was released in I believe 1953, so about 70 years ago. So there's a lot of, I think, almost, I don't want to say Freudian analysis that Edel brings to the subject, because I don't know enough about Freud to make a qualified guess like that, but he tries to get very analytical, very Oedipal in James's ties to his mother and his father, and kind of almost the kind of rivalry that Henry James had with his brother William James, who was an older brother and who became one of the leading philosophers and psychologists in America. So maybe, again, and that's the interesting, I'm kind of getting the Freudian underpinnings, when in fact his elder brother William became, I think, if I remember reading correctly somewhere online, that William James was one of the first educators in the United States to offer a university course on psychology. I could be wrong on that, or maybe one of the first, if not the first. There's a lot of the battlings between the siblings, but the character of the observer, as Henry James is so gifted at in his writing, through Edel's lens into the letters from the time, granted a lot of this comes from James's own memoirs that he wrote much later in life, but that he was always the observer, kind of the quiet one in the corner, just looking at the scenes and the individuals interacting around him. But then it was truly in Europe where this feeling awakened within him of creating, and when he was exposed to writers like Balzac, George Sand, George Eliot, Molière, writers like that, that struck him so heavily. And then, of course, and then when he returns to the United States, kind of in the middle, or right in time for the start of the Civil War, he's almost rendered an invalid because of various back injuries, and he doesn't there's almost a classic trope of he doesn't know what he wants to do with his life, and so he tries his hand, I think, at engineering, and then he goes to Harvard and then is thinking about law, but then kind of settles for the middle ground of just writing. He loves to read, and so he is mainly because of his father's connections. Granted, there is a lot of hard work that he puts into it, but one has to imagine if the Henry James that we know would have come at all if it wasn't for the immense wealth and influence of his father. Of course, you take that away, you take away everything. But so he starts writing for The Atlantic, which at that time is a very new publication. He starts writing critiques of novels. and then starts, and and when he gets into writing stories for himself, there is nothing but an immense influence from outside factors within his life. And this book ends just as he really starts to find his footing within London, but before he has really committed to writing any novels. He still tries to find himself, and Adel kind of points it up to a a death of a cousin as kind of the coming of age of Henry James as he finally finds his footing. So this book is very well written. It is highly readable. It's not that long. It's only like 330 pages, give or take. Very interesting if you're kind of intrigued by Henry James' writing and want to know a little bit more. Again, this is only volume 1 of 5, so I'm not going to read these all back to back to back, but I will be approaching the remaining volumes shortly. So, again, this gets a very strong recommendation from me. If you guys have read this, or if you are fans of Henry James' writing, drop a comment below, and I will see you guys next time.